This is Duke University.
So hi, my name is Alex, and this is Sean King, and we are the representatives of the Humor and Politics Working Group. You may remember us from last year. I know I remember a lot of your faces. This is, in fact, our third year running as the Humor and Politics Working Group. And as any group that's existed for 3 years, we have quite a lot of gratitude to list off, the first being the Duke University Center for International and Global Studies. The second being the Duke Program in American Values and Institutions, who has sponsored us from our first year. They're located in the Political Science Department. And the third being a collection of groups led by the Polis Center of the Public Policy School that have helped us organize some of our bigger events. Now, what makes us unique is that we are a collaboration of people both in the social sciences and the humanities. Our main collaborators last year, Sean and I represent the Political Science Department. Last year, we had a partnership with the English department. This year, we have a collaboration with the Art History department, which is reflected in the fact that our images and our cartoons have gotten a lot more sophisticated since last year. And our goals as a group have been consistently to explore the politics of humor and the humor that exists within politics, to try to understand complicated local and global political issues through the lens of humor and satire, to try to contribute to civic education through a lighthearted conversation. And so for that end, our group now has over 100 undergraduates, graduate students, and faculty members. Each of our meetings are about 20 to 25 people, and we continue these conversations every month during the fall and spring semester, hoping to spark a lot more interest in these types of issues from people that are not just your typical political science students, but students in the humanities, students in the sciences. We've had participants from math and bioengineering to art history and English. So that being said, I'm going to show you just a couple of the events we've done in the fall, and Sean will take it from here and tell you about what we're going to do in the spring. And so our first event this semester, and let me see if this goes well, was in September. We did a session on political cartoons, where we had a number of questions about the present and the past of political cartooning. We discussed controversies like Charlie Hebdo's cartoons after an Italian earthquake. These were pretty crude and pretty disrespectful, and we talked about the limits of what you're supposed to cartoon. We talked about the American political election and how important cartoons have been, and this was before the election, so the tone was much more lighthearted. And we talked about the history of cartoons. So one of our members, Catherine Deplanque, brought us 17th century and 18th century cartoons. And I don't have an example right now, partly because it's so enormous, but these old cartoons required an entire group of people, maybe a room like ours, to sit around and analyze each little detail in conversation. You would have maybe 10 characters, you would have 50 different little pieces happening. And we compared that to the instantaneous cartoon that has become commonplace in our political conversation, something you have to get in a second or it's not funny to you. And so we talked about that sort of culture. Our other big event this semester that we collaborated with a lot of people for was the Duke University Political Cartoon and Satire Fest. All of the American editorial cartoonists were here on campus. There were about 120 of them, I believe. You may have noticed them. They're all incredibly nerdy looking, and they look like the kind of people you might think would draw cartoons. They had, I think, a good number of panels. There must have been at least, I think, 8 panels on issues to do with the art and practice and politics of cartoons. I was the moderator for one of these panels called Tickling the Elephant's Funny Bone on the role of conservative cartoonists. There were 2 of them. I hear that they are the 2 that get touted out every year. And so we had a conversation about the role of conservative cartoons, again, before the election, in the political landscape. And we had a really good conversation about the need for bipartisan conversations or conversations across the lines where people with different political opinions can come together, laugh at each other productively, and talk about political issues. And so this is I have the full program if you want to have further questions about the topics we covered. We had a panel on Black Lives Matter, on international issues. But now I'm going to pass it on to Sean to talk about our other event this semester.
So, thank you. In one of our other talks, we discussed emerging trends in online discourse, such as memes, GIFs, and other strange forms of internet culture that are emerging on channels like 4chan and Reddit, and their role in the 2016 presidential election. And what was fascinating about this discussion was applying what we have used in the past, analytic tools that we have used in the past to describe the way humor works, the way political ideology works, and test those against emerging trends and the interpretive opportunities that strange things on the internet allow for. And so we tracked some of the viral trends that have coddled up to now President-elect Donald Trump's campaign through a movement called the alt-right, and tracked that up to the day after the election where we had our meeting, and we were able to look at articles from The Economist, from The Washington Post and The New York Times, all covering this emerging, percolating movement of the alt-right, along with President-elect Trump's appointment of Steve Bannon to his main strategist. This was an opportunity to sort of see politics changing before our eyes, and also the analytical tools that we normally use to describe politics needing to change and adapt. And so it was an interesting puzzle for us to wrap our minds around, because it's not exactly clear what the intention of these groups are in what we thought was a predictable form of political discourse. And so that was really exciting. So as to next semester, we have an outline of things that we plan on discussing that are generated by members of the working group. So one of them is dark humor, which is more of the aspects of alternative right humor that are emerging from corners of the internet that are now demanding a seat at the table of mainstream political discourse. We want to study that, understand it, understand the ways in which dark humor may leverage stereotypes and misinformation to generate humorous effect. And what efficacy does that have on people's partisanship? And then cynicism is a concept we've been dealing with perennially, which is in an increasingly partisan world. We want to know, how does humor insulate and basically promote inside different echo chambers the values that different ideological groups hold dear. And then funny without being meaning to be, and failure to be funny are two concepts that we're always dealing with when it comes to intentionality. People often intend to be humorous, but then their intentions might be perceived as insensitive to certain groups. This could bring in questions connected to liberalism, equality, coddling, free speech, and political correctness. And funny without meaning to be funny is another important question for political operatives, because often it's the case that politicians try to strategically use comedy or satire or snarky comments to both ill and clever effect. And we want to study how that works and the rising trends of that. And then lastly, humor and justice. It was proposed because one of our grad students in the group is interested in the writings and discourse in the criminal justice system, particularly surrounding questions connected to prison reform, and what does a form of political humor, how does a form of political humor work in a world with strong trends in incarceration. And so those are some of the main concepts we're dealing with. And again, it's an opportunity to apply analyticity to very slippery political phenomena, right? And so it's a great testing ground for the strength and weaknesses of concepts that we use to describe political phenomena.
Great. Well, thank you very much. As you can see, our humor has gotten a little darker since last year, but we blame the American political election for that. Thank you again for your support.